All right, guys, we're going to go on and get started. The few of you who do not have a note sheet because you weren't here yesterday, they will be coming shortly. The printer is just finished printing them up. They'll be here in a second. Now, what we're continuing on with is factoring. We did a few of these yesterday, and we're going to continue on with them today. Now, there are 5 main steps in factoring. The first one is to find the greatest common factor if there is one. There will not always be one, but if there is, we factor it out. We take it out. We follow it up with 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces for our step number 2. After we do that, our third step is to find the sign, and we look at the third term. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. Our fourth step is to find the factors of the first and third term and then plug those factors in. And when we plug them in, we're going to pick which one we want to try first, plug it in, move on to step 5, which is check. When we check it, if it does work out to be the correct middle term, because that's what we're looking for when we're checking, then we have the correct factors and we're done. If not, we go back, pick a different set of factors, and try it again. So we look at this problem here, 3x squared minus 7x plus 2. The first thing we're looking for is the greatest common factor. Is there a number or term that will go into all 3? Right, 1 is the only one, but it's not helpful. So we just have this here. Because 3, 7, and 2 are all prime, so we don't have a greatest common factor. Which means we can move on to step number 2. Our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. And that's all for step 2. We move on to step 3, finding the signs. And to find the sign, we look at the third term. Might be helpful. And for this one here, the third term is positive. The signs are the same, and they match the sign of the middle term. Negative. So both of them will be minus. Both of those signs will be minuses, negatives, but they're going to be the same. Questions on steps 1 through 3. Step number 4 is to find the factors of the first and third terms, because that's what's going to go in our other spaces, is those factors. And their product, their combination, will give us the middle term. Now, if we look at 3x squared, we kind of talked about this yesterday, but x squared, there's only one way we can get x squared, and that's x times x. If there's only one setup for it, well, we'll go on and put it in. Since x squared was in the first term, it's going to go in the first spot in each of the sets of parentheses. If the x squared was with the 2 in the last spot, it would go in the last spot for both of the sets of parentheses. Okay, any questions on this so far? Now we need to find the factors of 3. Well, what multiplies together to give us 3? And that's it. We said it's prime, so 1 and 3 are the only ones we have. So we need to determine, are we going to put the 3 in the first set of parentheses or the second? It doesn't matter, we just need to pick one. We'll put 3 in the first. Right, we don't have to write it. We can put it, it's technically there, we just don't have to write it down. Because it's 1x. Yes. Factors of 2. 1 and 2, are there any others? No. So we just need to plug those 2 in. So we need to determine which set of parentheses we want the 1 and which one we want the 2 in. And with most of these here, especially with the placement and picking them out, the more that you do, and the more of these that you do, the more that you'll see patterns emerge of how the numbers will work with each other. Now, the last step is to check. Now, well, what's 3x times x? 3x squared. Well, where did we get the 3x and x from? Well, the factors of 3x squared. So they should multiply back together to give us 3x squared. The only way they won't is if for some reason we actually picked wrong factors. If we put 2x and 2x in there instead of 3 and 1, then it would give us the wrong factors, but that's because they're not the right factors. 1 times, well, negative 1 times negative 2 is still positive 2, yes? Well, we got that from factors of 2. We don't have to check those. It's not wrong to check those, but we don't have to. The main ones that we want to check are these here. Our 3x times negative 2 is negative 6x. Our negative 1 times x is negative 1x. Negative 6x minus x is negative 7x. Is that the middle term we wanted? Yeah. Since that is the middle term we wanted it to be, it means 3x minus 1 times x minus 2 are the factors of this quadratic.
So we use whatever sign.
If the third term is positive, yes. Because if the third term is positive, the signs are going to be the same in both. And they're going to be whatever the middle term is. Because as we see here, negative 1 times negative 2 does give us a positive 2. But we can also see that the middle terms are added together. So if they're both negative and multiply together, we get a positive. But when we add those two negatives together, it stays negative. If the two middle terms had been positive, when we added them together, we would have had a positive 7x. So that's why that works. I think it's a neat little thing. It's a neat little trick that helps us with signs. Because if we didn't have this, especially finding the factors of negative 2, well, we'd have negative 1 times 2. But we'd also have 1 times negative 2. We'd have to consider every factor with the positive negative. Well, actually, sorry. It would be negative 1 because it's positive 2. Yeah, it doesn't hurt too much, but some of them, we have to start taking that sign into account. Does that make sense? I think it makes it a little bit easier when we're not worried about signs or figuring out the signs when trying to find the factors. Let's look at the next one. 2x squared plus 7x plus 6. Is there a greatest common factor between 2, 7, and 6? No. 2 and 6, yes. But the 7 throws everything off. So since there's no greatest common factor, 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Signs. So it takes care of steps 1 and 2. Step 3, find the sign. Yes, because if the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So third term's positive, signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. Plus and plus. Step number 4. Factors of the first and third term are 2x squared and 6. Well, 2x squared, x squared, we know its factors have to be what? So we have x and x just for the x squared. Now, we did that because x squared, there's only one way to do it. There's only one setup, there's only one set, so we go on and throw those in. Now, if we look at 2, what are the factors of 2? 2 and 1. Are there any others? No. So that means we can just throw that in. Yeah. We can put the 2 in front of 1, put the 1 in front of the other. We don't have to write it because 1 is understood with the x, but we have this here. Yes? Questions on this here? What are the factors of 6? Okay. So 6, on the other hand, has 2 different sets of factors, yes? Okay, so now we're actually going to have to pick which one we want. 2 and 3. Which one goes first? And 3, yes? Now, again, we could multiply it all the way through if we wanted. So I could do 2x times x, which gives us 2x squared. And I could do the 2 times 3, which still gives us 6. That's not wrong. It's just work we don't have to do. Those should always check out. 2x times 3 is, and it's positive. We don't necessarily have to write the plus. 2 times x would be plus 8x. Before we move on, I want to point out something, because it might not be completely obvious at this point. Is there a greatest common factor in either one of those sets of parentheses? Well, the first one has 2x and 2, yes? Is there a greatest common factor between those? 2, isn't it? If there's not a greatest common factor to start with, there cannot be one in either set of parentheses. Because if this did work, I have a greatest common factor of 2 here, yes? That means we could factor it out. But we've already seen and checked that it doesn't work. Because if this did work, it'd be 2, and we would have x plus 1 times x plus 3. If there's not a greatest common factor to begin with, there can't be one in any of the parentheses. And that may seem neither here nor there, but if we think about it, that means, well, for this problem here, well, that's telling us, one, we've already seen that the 2 can't go there. What other factor of 6 cannot go there? 6, because 6 and 2 has a greatest common factor of 2. Anything in that first set of parentheses with the 2x, the number next to it cannot have a factor of 2. 6 can't go there. 2 can't go there.
So
It'd have to be 1 or 3. Two x times 2 is 4x. 3 times x is plus 3x, which is positive 7x. Is that what we wanted? Yes. Now, if that's something that's a little bit confusing, it's hard to see, that's fine. Because even if we didn't see that or notice that, when we checked it with the 2x and 2, it still told us it wasn't right, correct? So knowing that just makes it a little bit easier. We can remove factors, remove setups of this here. Does that make sense? It's not something that's absolutely necessary to be able to factor, but it's something that makes it faster. Because all that did was tell us that, well, if I get it right, having it set up as this 6 and 1 is a setup I don't have to try. Because I know the 2x and 6 has a greatest common factor of 2. It's not going to work. I don't have to check it. I don't have to try that arrangement. And with some of them, especially when we get bigger factors in these places, the number of setups that I can remove by some of these little tips and tricks or kind of little things that we notice, it's going to make it easier and faster. Questions on this so far? Let's look at this one here. 4x squared minus 7x plus 3. Is there a greatest common factor? No. So we move on to step number 2. 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Step number 3 is to find the sign. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. Here, the third term is positive. Signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term, which is negative. So we have negative and negative. So we do have x and x for our x squared. So we have 1 and 4 or 2 and 2. So, yeah. So what do we want to try? 1 and 4 or 2 and 2? So 1 and 4, I'll put the 4 over here. But again, with any of these here, try 1 and 4, 2 and 2. But as Owen was just saying and kind of pointing through, the more of these that you do, the easier you'll be able to see how they work. Does that make sense? So that you'll work through them a little bit quicker. The factors of 3 are 1 and 3. So I'm just going to put 1 and 3 down. And especially if you're not used to these or still trying to get comfortable with them, just be putting in place and pick which one. So 1 and 4 or 2 and 2, pick one of them. Throw it in front of X. 3 only has 1 and 3, throw them in. Pick a spot, throw them in. Because the last step that we're always going to do is to check. So X times negative 3 is negative 3X. Negative 1 times 4X is negative, which is and that's it. So it could be that you just throw them in and it actually gives you the correct setup. If not, the first thing I would have done here is switch the 1 and 3. Checked it again. If that didn't work, then I would have switched to the 2 and 2 and tried it in both ways. Questions on this here? So I would have 2x minus 1, 2x minus 3. And here, technically, switching the 1 and 3 wouldn't do anything, which was what I was meaning by the other wave. So we try flipping it, trying it in every arrangement to see which one works. Questions on this so far? So, greatest common factor between these three here. There's not one. So we move to step number 2, our 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Correct. Yep. So again, step 3, if the third term is positive, the signs are the same and they match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, the signs are opposite. So when we look at this here, the third term is indeed negative. So the signs are opposite. And it seems like there should be more to that statement or there's some unique key feature to it. No, they're just opposite. One's positive, one's negative. And again, our last step is to check. So whatever we do, we will check it. We will make sure that it works. So it's almost a little bit of dealer's choice, which one you want positive, which one negative. Pick and plug it in, because we will check it at the end to make sure it works. And that brings us to the 4th step. Now, before we move on to the 4th step, one thing I do want to say is when that third term is negative, the sign of the middle term, for plugging it in, which one's positive, which one does not have an impact. Third term's negative, they're opposite. End of story. The only time we look at the middle term when dealing with signs is if the third term's positive. If the third term's negative, it's just opposites.
You want to get blood Friday?
I can't. I gave in August.
Anybody else wants to give blood? Anybody want to give blood here?
All right. So we have the opposite signs. Now the fourth step is to find the factors of the first and third terms. Well, the first term would be x and x for our x squared. Well, 2 is, so 2 and 1, we just need to put the 2 in front of one of the x's. Which one do we want? 1 first, 2 second. 7, well, the only factors of 7 are 7 and 1, yes? So which one do we want to put the 7 with? Here? 7 and 1. Because again, yes. So we don't have to factor out -7 because of step 3. And that's part of the reason why I like step 3 so much, is because we don't have to worry about signs when we find the factors. It takes care of all the signs for us. And then when we check it, x times -1 is -x. 7 times 2x is plus 14x, which is positive 13x. So that's not the term we want. Let's try switching the 2. I want to switch the 2 to the front. Now, at this point, because there's only one set of factors for 2 and 7, we're going to flip one or the other. We can flip the 1 and 7 or the 2 and 1. I did this. 2x times -1 is -2x. 7 times x is plus, and -2x plus 7x is that the middle term we wanted? It is 5x, yes? But we want it to be what? Yes. If you ever get the correct number but wrong sign, flip the signs. 3-1, yes. Now I'm going to go on and check it again so that we can see this. 2x times 1 is now just 2x. -7 times x is now -7x. So if you see from that one and the one before it, the signs flipped. The 2x went from negative to positive. The 7x went from positive to negative, which actually gives us a -5x. So we are worried about the sign for the middle term because we want them to match, be the same. We don't have to worry about signs when factoring because step number 3 took care of that when plugging in the factors of 7.
So would our answer just be?
Yes. So this here is your answer. The 3 that we have written to the side is just making sure we got it set up correctly. We're checking to make sure that it is the correct set of factors. Questions on this here? Questions? So, almost there. I don't know. Yeah, it was this here. So the 7 times 2x is where we got the 14. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Yes. This is one of the few parts in Algebra 2 where it's not a set method, a set equation. We've got to test and check, guess and check essentially to try to get to where we want. Does that make sense? Now, I will say the more of these that you do, now, this is the last one, and again, I'm going to emphasize this. I've already said it a lot today, and I said it a good number of times yesterday. The more of these that you do, the better you're going to get at, and that's just a given with most things. but also the more of them that you do, you'll start seeing patterns in how the numbers work out, especially with the middle term. Because if the middle term is bigger, we're either going to probably use bigger factors, or how they're going to multiply together is going to give us a bigger number. If the middle term is smaller, we're probably going to use smaller factors or factors that are closer together, because then they'll multiply together. And when we start seeing those patterns, we can start actually eliminating some possibilities or just putting them to the back. We're going to try them later. We have a small middle term, and one of the factors is 1 in 75. There's a good chance 1 in 75 is not going to be the factors we want. So as you do more of them, you'll be able to see it and factor them quicker.
So once this is where we have a very common factor between 3,
We cannot, because there is a greatest common factor of 3 between 3 and 6, but it has to be in common with all 3. You know, it has to be in common with all 3. So we can't factor it out. But we do have 2 sets of parentheses with 3 spaces. Finding our signs. If the third term is positive, the signs are the same and match the sign of the middle term. If the third term is negative, they're opposite. And it doesn't matter how we put them. If you put it as positive then negative, that's fine too. Or negative and positive. We just need to put one as negative, one as positive. They need to be opposite. And that brings us to the 4th step. Any questions on this plus or minus, minus or plus? X squared is x and x. We can put that in for sure. Yeah. So x and x, 3 and 1, yes? So 3 and 1, we just got to plug them in because that's the only factors of 3. I decided to put it in the first, 1 in the second. But again, as I'm saying with most of this here, guess it. That's all we're doing. We're just plugging it in, and then we're going to check it at the end. 2 in the first, 3 in the last. Right. Because if we had 3x minus 3, there is a greatest common factor of 3. And if there is one there, there had to be one at the beginning. Since there's not, they can't go together. 3x times 3 is 9x. Negative 2 times x is, and 9x minus 2x is that the middle term we wanted? Yes. The nice thing about changing the signs is whichever one was negative, it's easy to make it positive because we just add a line. And if we check this here, we'd have 9x, negative 9x plus 2x, which is negative 7x.
I swapped them, but now I've is that negative and that's positive?
Yes.
Oh, I had it right. 3.
Right, because x times 2 would give us 2x. Negative 3 times 3x is negative 9x, which gives us...
That's what I thought. That's what I had.
Yeah.
But I was like,
And this is the same as what we have up here.
Okay.
They're just
Swap.
switched because multiplication works in either order. And that's actually a good thing to point out. So guys, one other thing with this is we got this here as the correct answer, yes? Actually, this here is also the correct answer.
Oh, so now we have multiple answers.
Well, they're being, because when we have 2 sets of parentheses next to each other, they are being multiplied, yes? Because the order in which we multiply things matter. Is 7 times 2 the same as 2 times 7. It's the same, yes? So these two statements aren't different answers. They're just written in a different order. Does that make sense? No. You don't have to write all possible. So if you got the first one, that's the correct answer. If you have it written as the second one, that's still the correct answer. You don't have to have both. You just need one of these, and I will check either order. Three through 10. 3 through 10.